Now,
And there's the squatters' rights.
yeah, now there's so to address the squatters' rights issue, I'm going to step back again. So I mentioned earlier private law. So I didn't mention the other. There's two foundational kind of divisional concepts that we have in legal theory or jurisprudence: public law and private law. Private law is the law that governs interactions between private individuals. So that's torts, contracts, and property. And then there's public law. Public law is the law that governs the state and the state's use of coercion against individuals. So public law is constitutional law, because that's about limiting the state, and it's criminal law. Is primarily. And then administrative law is a type of public law because it is the state acting. Now those, they can overlap, right? So you can have matters that you can have private rights of action about, right? Private complaints about. So a squatter is guilty of a private cause of action for trespass. I can sue them in court for trespassing on my property rights and get damages and an injunction to kick them off. They're also committing a crime. Trespass is not just a private cause of action in property law and torts, it's also a crime, as it should be. And so if a person you can show mens rea, they intentionally did it, they deliberately did it, and it was more severe than just a mere trespass. You can also have it prosecuted as a crime. And so you have this overlap, and we've seen this before. Probably the most prominent example was O.J. Simpson, where he got off on because his lawyers were able to razzle dazzle and confuse the jury so that they didn't realize that you had a guy who committed first degree murder, and multiple murders, and he got off on the crime, and because of double jeopardy, he can't be prosecuted. You can't be prosecuted twice for a crime. Another very important limitation on state power. But then he was sued for wrongful death, which is a private tort. And that's why they got millions and millions of dollars in judgment against him. And also because the standards of proof are a lot lower, because you're not talking about the government coercion in that context, you're talking about payment of damages.
So can the police just kick a squatter out of private property, or does this have to go through a court and a whole process?
The police, if there is a squatter, and they're being deliberate, and it's clear that they're squatting on someone's property rights, the police can forcibly remove them from the property. Yes. If they refuse to leave, but it has to be clear it's a squatter, right? So if the person's there saying, well, I have a right to here, and here's this lease, right? That I signed, and police aren't lawyers, and their job isn't to resolve those types of disputes. So if there's some lack of clarity as to what the nature of the dispute is, they may not take action.
And there seems to be some states in which squatters have more rights or more allowed more leeway than other states.
Yes,
it's harder to get rid of people in California, easier for in Texas.
Well, and we should be thankful we don't live in England. England, they have absolute squatters' rights. So there are stories of people who go on vacation and they come home and there's someone in their home and they can't get them kicked out.
Really?
Yeah, because the rule is as long as the person is in the home, they have a right to be there. And so that's the rule in England. And so, of course, if the person leaves, then the person who actually has title, legal right to the property, can then close the door and lock it and keep them out. But so some people arrange for their friends to bring them food and stuff like that, and they never. Yeah. So there are these issues, and then there's also a really cool doctrine that I teach, as I do the first year property course, which I love teaching, every year. Just taught it the last semester. There's a really cool doctrine that had developed at common law called adverse possession, which is a really fantastic doctrine, which basically says, look, if you're an absentee landowner, who has this piece of paper that says I have legal title, but you're not doing anything with your property for a significant number of years. Usually it's about 20, it's about 20 years, sometimes 30 or 40. And there's someone else who comes on the property and for 20 or 30 years is living openly on the property. Like they build a house, they cut down trees, right? So all the property owner had to do once in 20 or 30 years is come out, look at the property, see the person and say, hey, you're on my land, you're trespassing, get off. That's all they have to do to stop it.
Yep.
But if they don't do it, then when they eventually come around, they'll say, you've lost your right. This person has been doing everything with the land that is fundamental to what we mean when we want to protect property. They've been engaging in value creating productive activities with valueless materials in the world. And you've been sitting back for several decades with a piece of paper that says legal title. And that's not what makes property property. It is a great example of the common law is not a legal positivist regime. It always was focused on the underlying reasons for why we have property contracts and why we protect people's bodily integrity through torts. Yeah.
Yes, I like that too. I talked about it on the show a while ago. Some people couldn't believe that you could actually lose your property right by not doing anything with the property. But yeah, I think that's completely objective.